So, we're getting a divorce today. My mistress didn't want to deal with the caregiving, so I left it to you.
What? The sudden mention of divorce and infidelity left me stunned. An affair? I managed to ask in a barely audible voice. Tom raised his chin and laughed as if he were proud when I questioned him. Grinning as he showed me pictures of his mistress, Tom had no idea how repulsive he looked. Fine, here's the divorce papers. I thrust the hidden divorce papers at him. I packed my things with tears streaming down my face, not from sadness or regret, but from anger. But I was determined not to go down quietly, so I left the house I had lived in for 40 years. My name is Mary, and I'm a 65-year-old housewife. My husband, Tom, who is 2 years younger than me, and I will celebrate our 40th wedding anniversary next year. We met at work and had a love marriage. I was Tom's direct supervisor and trained him. While working hard together, Tom developed feelings for me. We started dating and eventually got married. At the same time, I retired from my job to start our family. Since Tom is the eldest son, I moved in with his family, including his parents, grandparents, and younger sister, Nancy. Living with other people takes work. They were all very kind, but being constantly mindful of everyone and everything was still exhausting. Tom's mother, Jane, always stood by me during those times. Like me, Jane had married into this family.
Why don't you visit your parents and take a break occasionally?
Jane would give me money for travel expenses to visit my parents in free time. Though there were tough times, Jane was always very good to me. 40 years have passed since then. Nancy got married and moved far away, and our daughter Emma and son Mark were born. We said goodbye to Tom's grandparents, his father, and my parents. And despite everything that happened, the busy years flew by. At the time, I thought life would be peaceful as we aged, but it doesn't seem to be that simple now. The reason likely dates back about 10 years. When I returned home from shopping, Jane collapsed in the living room. When I returned home from shopping, I found Jane collapsed in the living room. Jane. I immediately rushed to her. I called an ambulance, and Jane was taken to the hospital. The test results showed that Jane had suffered a stroke, and that was why she had collapsed.
It's a good thing you found her quickly. Many people don't survive this.
I shouldn't have gone out. The doctor soothed Tom, moved him away from me, and explained Jane's condition. Nancy, who had married and moved away, also told me the same thing as the doctor and thanked me. Thanks to them, my regret lightened a bit. However, Tom was different.
Where the hell were you wandering off to, leaving Mom alone at home?
As soon as he arrived at the hospital, Tom yelled at me. His outburst shocked me, as did the nurses, doctors, other patients, and their families, who all turned to look. I'm sorry. I was just out buying the things you needed for your trip.
Are you saying it's my fault? No excuses.
I didn't mean that. I'm really sorry. Feeling the eyes of everyone around us, I just apologized to Tom.
Tom, please calm down. Mary saved Jane's life.
The doctor soothed Tom, moved him away from me, and then explained Jane's condition. When Tom returned to me, he wasn't yelling anymore, but still looked very displeased. Feeling uncomfortable next to Tom, I stared at Jane lying in bed. Even though Jane had just collapsed, Tom went on his business trip. I thought it was unbelievable, but having just been yelled at, I didn't want to bother stopping him and said nothing. From that day on, I started caring for Jane's daily needs. At the same time, I had to prepare for her discharge from the hospital. Jane, it seems like you can't move freely anymore. It might be hard to take care of you at home. I reported Jane's condition and consulted with Tom when he returned from his 1 week business trip as planned. However, my words went in one ear and out the other. He had yelled at me so much in the hospital, but now he acted like it was someone else's problem.
Really? That sounds tough.
Yes, and the doctor suggested it might be best for Jane to visit a facility, so I brought some brochures.
A facility?
Finally, Tom looked at me. I thought he would want to personally check where his mother would live, so I quickly handed him the brochures. This one is popular and very nice. My friend's mother is also there, and this one just opened, so it's spotless. Modern facilities are like hotels now. Jane could take proper baths more quickly than at home, making moving around easier because of the barrier-free environment. Although Jane had trouble speaking, she loved to talk, so being surrounded by staff and having more opportunities to converse would also help with her rehabilitation. I explained all this to Tom, hoping he would consider the facilities I had suggested. Tom, which one do you think is better? Jane will still be in the hospital for a while, so we have time to visit the facilities before deciding.
What on earth are you talking about?
Contrary to my hopeful tone, Tom frowned.
Put Mom in a facility? Are you crazy? Why do you think you're at home?
What?
Don't run away from caregiving. You should take care of her at home.
I was stunned. I'm not running away, but sometimes I must go shopping or other things, and I need help managing everything. I understand if we hire a helper, but
A helper? You think I'd let a stranger into our house? We'll manage. Besides, Mom would definitely prefer to be at home. We're not putting her in a facility.
Tom was adamant. Suddenly, anxiety washed over me. I've never done caregiving before. There's no way I can do this alone. I consulted with the nurses and the attending doctor. Everyone smiled wryly at Tom's decision for me to handle the caregiving alone without hiring any help. The doctor tried to convince Tom to hire a helper at least, but Tom remained firm. So Jane was discharged and came back home. While it was a relief, I was filled with anxiety as I began caring for Jane from that day on. As expected, caregiving was much more challenging than I had imagined.
It would be better if I weren't here, rather than making you do all this, Mary.
Jane felt guilty about making me care for her, and that phrase became a common refrain. Even though she had trouble speaking, Jane was always considerate of me. Please don't say that. I'm sorry if I'm not doing well and making things hard for you. I didn't want Jane to feel responsible, so I encouraged her. And so, with occasional help from Emma and Mark, I dedicated myself fully to taking care of Jane. Despite seeing the three of us working together, Tom still acted like it was someone else's problem.
See, you can do it. Suggesting a facility was trying to escape, wasn't it?
Every time Tom saw me bathing Jane or feeding her, he would say that and laugh. I wished he would at least take our kids with him, but he always prioritized himself, ignoring the family. That wasn't the worst part.
Hey, the room's a bit messy, isn't it?
On days when I couldn't keep up with housework due to Jane's hospital visits, Tom would frown and mutter complaints.
Why don't you get Emma to do it?
Even when I explained why, he never understood.
There's no way I can sleep in this house.
Sometimes, when things were terrible, Tom would say that and leave the house. If dinner wasn't ready, he would go out to eat alone. I wished he would at least take our kids with him, but he always put himself first, ignoring the family. One day, when I was about to do laundry, I picked up Tom's pants and found a crumpled piece of paper in the pocket. The night before, he had left as usual, saying there was nothing to eat. It turned out to be a receipt from a restaurant, but something felt off. It was a typical chain restaurant receipt, but it was clearly for two people. Moreover, he had gone to a location in a neighboring town, even though there was another branch just 10 minutes from our house. Could it be? My hands trembled with anger. I wasn't so naive as to overlook this. I was sure that Tom was seeing another woman. That night, I decided to confront him. We still needed money for our kids' education, and I couldn't abandon Jane's care. Divorce wasn't easy, so I needed Tom to stop this foolishness and repent immediately. What is the meaning of this? I thrust the receipt at Tom.
I just went out for dinner.
At first, Tom pretended to be innocent, but my reasoning left him speechless. If you apologize now, I'll let it go. Stop this foolishness immediately. Seeing Tom's reluctance to admit anything, I delivered my final ultimatum. Then Tom let out a deep sigh, and he said something that shocked me.
You should be the one apologizing. The house is messy, and you can't even prepare a decent meal despite being a housewife.
That's because
There you go with excuses. You've let yourself go, and if you don't want me to look elsewhere, you need to change first.
his words cut deep into my heart. It's not that I don't want to focus on the housework, and I'd love to dress up and go out occasionally. But right now, I'm responsible for Jane's life. I don't want to blame Jane for what I can't do, but Tom's complete lack of understanding of caregiving's challenges made me sad and frustrated. Laughing at my speechlessness, Tom left the house. I heard the car engine start. He was probably heading back to that woman. As the sound of the car faded, I quietly shed tears alone. Since then, a vast wall had grown between us. We only talked to each other as needed in front of the kids, but when we were alone, there was no conversation. In fact, we both avoided being alone together. I'd stopped expecting anything from Tom, which made things a bit easier. Even when he didn't come home or when I found evidence on his clothes, I stayed numb. 10 years after Jane had her stroke, the long caregiving journey suddenly ended one day. One morning, Jane passed away peacefully in her sleep. Caregiving was challenging and sometimes frustrating, but I managed because I was caring for Jane. That's why Jane's absence left me feeling lonely and with a deep sense of loss. It's not a comparison, but I grieved more than when my own mother passed away and cried like a child. Since I joined this family, Jane has been my emotional support.
What are you sad about? You said caregiving was hard. Are you just trying to play the good wife?
Even though his own mother had died, Tom directed harsh words at me.
Dad, that's not fair.
Yeah, Mom really loved Grandma.
Our kids defended me, speaking up to Tom, but even their words didn't change his sneering attitude. Nancy, who had rushed over, looked disgusted by Tom's behavior. Tom served as the chief mourner. He is the eldest son, and it should be no surprise. Though he had behaved coldly towards us, he fulfilled his role in front of the funeral home staff and the attendees, and both the wake and funeral went smoothly. When everything was over, we returned home. The house felt empty and silent without Jane. While I was lost in thought, Tom spoke to me before I could catch my breath.
It's finally over.
Yes, it felt like it had been a long time since we last talked. And when I turned to face him, Tom was grinning.
You're finally free too.
Free? It was hard, but I'm glad I spent that time with Jane. We had many good conversations.
No need to play the good wife here. It's all over now.
Tom's words felt strange, and I waited for him to continue. Then the following words out of Tom's mouth were shocking.
So, we're getting a divorce today. My mistress didn't want to deal with the caregiving, so I left it to you.
What? The sudden mention of divorce and infidelity left me stunned. An affair? I managed to ask in a barely audible voice. Tom raised his chin and laughed as if he were proud.
Oh, I hadn't introduced her to you, had I? It's not just an affair. I'm serious about her. Her name is Jessica.
I was stunned by his words. It must be the same woman I confronted him about before, so it never ended. Tom, grinning as he showed me pictures of himself with Jessica, had no idea how repulsive he looked. Fine, here's the divorce papers. I thrust the hidden divorce papers at him. Tom looked surprised for a moment, then smirked again.
I'm glad you're being sensible about this.
He took the divorce papers, grabbed a nearby pen, and quickly filled them out.
I'll go ahead and file these. Now get out.
Ignoring Tom's words, I locked myself in my room. I packed my things with tears streaming down my face, not from sadness or regret, but from anger. But I was determined not to go down quietly, so I left the house I had lived in for 40 years. From that day on, I moved in with Emma, who lived alone in a neighboring town. When Emma found out I had been kicked out, she invited me to stay with her.
Mom, you can live here with me.
I hesitated but decided to accept her kindness for a while. About 3 days later, still busy and yet to become accustomed to this new life, I received a call on my cell phone. It was Tom. He informed me that the divorce papers had been processed, so it probably wasn't urgent. I ignored the call and continued my tasks, but the phone kept ringing repeatedly. How annoying. Feeling irritated, I reluctantly answered the phone, and Tom shouted at me.
Hey, what's going on?
The volume of his voice made me pull the phone away from my ear. After making sure he had calmed down, I started the conversation. What's the matter now?
Mom's account is empty. What's going on? I paid for all the caregiving expenses. Where did you take Mom's money?
I could hear someone in the background saying, "Please calm down," as Tom shouted frantically. It seemed he was at the bank. Who knows? Maybe Jane took it with her to heaven? Hearing Tom's panic even over the phone made me laugh.
What? Are you kidding me? You must have taken it.
Tom was getting more agitated, raising his voice. Of course not. I just did what Jane told me to do. Those words brought Tom back to his senses, and he stopped shouting.
What do you mean? What Jane told you?
Yes, she gave me a small monthly allowance as a thank you for caring for her. It wasn't much, but over 10 years, it adds up. Tom fell silent at that. Too bad you thought you'd get a big inheritance and a new wife after Jane passed away, I said, laughing. Jane always felt guilty about making me care for her and about Emma and Mark helping out. Moreover, she couldn't have been unaware of her own son Tom's abusive words and terrible behavior towards me while living in the same house.
I'm so sorry for Tom's behavior, Mary. You're such a wonderful daughter-in-law.
Jane would often cry quietly. Jane was the one most hurt by Tom's actions. That's why I could never forgive or accept him.
This is all I can do.
Jane said, as she started giving money to me and the children. We can't accept this.
Please, just take it.
Even when I refused, Jane insisted on giving us the money. Jane probably felt guilty about having me take care of her. I decided to accept it as a small allowance to ease her mind. Although Tom's salary did cover some caregiving expenses, more was needed. I used Jane's money for her care and medical bills. Whatever was left, I saved in accounts for me and the kids, a testament to Jane's kindness. When Tom heard this, he was furious again.
You did this without my permission.
It was Jane's money. She could do whatever she wanted with it.
I'm the heir.
Tom tried to assert his rights, but now that there was nothing to inherit, it meant nothing. Jane's body was frail, but her mind was clear. She decided how to use her money. You have no right to interfere. I repeated this several times, but Tom wouldn't accept it. He even suggested getting a lawyer involved. Though it was a hassle, I reluctantly agreed. I had planned to do that from the beginning. A few days later, I received a call from the lawyer.
According to Tom, you stole his mother's money. Is that correct?
I was stunned by the sudden accusation. I can't believe Tom said such a thing. I was utterly shocked. Let's meet and discuss this. I arranged a meeting with the lawyer for a later date. On the appointed day, I gathered all the necessary documents, Jane's bank book, my bank book, the bank books I borrowed from Emma and Mark, and the household ledger. I went to the lawyer's office and entered the meeting room. There, I was surprised again.
Oh, here you come.
There was Tom sitting back arrogantly. Next to him was a middle-aged woman. After listening silently to the speaker, Nancy sighed when the lawyer finished speaking. I took the seat the lawyer indicated.
Stealing Jane's money is a serious offense. You should be thankful no charges have been filed against you.
Still believing Tom's lies, the lawyer sighed and spoke to me. I laid out all the bank books and documents before the lawyer. I didn't steal anything. You are being deceived by these people. Now it was the lawyer's turn to be surprised. I opened the bank books and household ledger before the three of them and began to explain. The money received, the items purchased, and the amount spent. The remaining balance was deposited in my account, but it was minimal. Tom didn't take care of his mother at all. Isn't it terrible that he wants to take all the money now? Despite my desperate plea, Tom and Jessica continued to snicker.
Stop lying.
Yes, Tom always told me that you, his wife, refused to help with the caregiving.
Is that so?
I was speechless. The lawyer completely believed Tom and Jessica's story. His gaze toward me was cold, but I didn't give up. All right, let's ask Nancy. I mentioned the name as a last resort. It would be best to ask Jane in heaven, but since we can't, we'll ask Nancy.
Nancy?
The lawyer looked puzzled.
She's my sister.
Tom explained to the lawyer. Nancy is Tom's biological sister and one of the heirs, which makes her potentially disadvantageous to me. I was suggesting we ask her for her account. The lawyer must have found it strange that I wanted to talk to someone who could potentially undermine my case. Tom smirked.
But isn't Nancy busy right now? Well, if you really insist, we can ask her.
I'll do whatever it takes, rather than just silently following your orders. I must be wrong if Nancy also thinks I'm the bad guy. I called Nancy. It was a gamble, but I was confident.
Mary, what's going on?
Nancy answered the phone right away. The lawyer explained the situation on my behalf. After listening silently to the speaker, Nancy sighed when the lawyer finished speaking. As soon as Tom heard her sigh, he began to speak triumphantly.
You must be angry too, right? Mom's money was stolen. You could have inherited it too.
The lawyer kept a serious face, staring at the phone. However, Tom froze at Nancy's response.
Tom, what are you talking about? Do you know how grateful Mom was to Mary? Stop interfering with what Mom decided to do with her money. It's disgraceful.
Nancy echoed the exact words I had once said to Tom. Tom, not expecting this, began to panic.
Even so,
Besides, I received a payout from the life insurance, which is more than enough.
Tom's eyes widened at Nancy's words.
life insurance? No one told me.
Mom didn't include you. She said she didn't want to give anything to Tom, who made Mary suffer.
What?
My guess was right. Nancy had sided with me. Hearing the shocking truth, Tom turned bright red and buried his head in his hands. He pounded the desk with his fist. He must have been incredibly frustrated. Serves him right. Nancy, unaware of this, continued to speak.
Excuse me? Tom's story is a complete lie. In fact, our mother wanted to leave money for Mary. That's why I suggested giving her money for living expenses and as an allowance.
I see.
But Mary, being so kind, felt it would be unfair and insisted that our mother make me the beneficiary of her life insurance instead.
I smirked at Nancy's words. I wasn't trying to curry favor, but knowing this fact assured me that Nancy wouldn't betray me. It was partly due to Nancy's character that I had confidently suggested we speak to her.
Besides, Tom was always fooling around with his mistress, leaving Mary to handle all the caregiving. He's truly worthless.
When Nancy started saying this, Tom quickly looked up. His face was still red, and he frantically reached for his phone and hung up, even though the call was still ongoing. He then laughed awkwardly to cover it up. Having listened to everything, the lawyer shifted his sharp gaze from me to Tom.
It seems I've been deceived. What they told me was a lie.
Well, I mean,
The lawyer said to Tom, clearly exasperated. Tom turned bright red, his mouth opening and closing silently. He seemed at a loss for words. Taking advantage of the pause, I spoke up. By the way, I haven't received any compensation for the affair from these two. Can I file for that now? Before I finished asking, Jessica, sitting indifferently, suddenly looked up.
What?
Oh, the affair. Yes, of course, you can.
And we haven't done the division of assets either. Luckily, we can handle everything at once. Thank you for bringing us together, I said, smiling brightly at the two now crestfallen faces.
This is your fault. How could this happen?
I didn't expect this either. You're the one who insisted on getting a lawyer.
The two of them began to argue next to the lawyer. The lawyer, trying to calm them down, looked flustered while I watched with a smirk.
We're losing the money and have to pay up. What are we going to do now?
Jessica, calm down.
I'm sorry. I didn't think it would come to this. This is all your fault.
Their argument grew more heated, and it looked like it might turn on me, so I quickly stood up and left. I will get back to you with the request later.
Oh, yes. Thank you for coming today.
And with that, I left before getting caught up in the argument. A few days later, I formally discussed the situation with the lawyer and arranged to claim compensation from Tom and Jessica for the affair. The lawyer felt responsible for initially believing Tom's lies and summoning me, so he promised to handle the case properly. Please don't apologize. I'm counting on you.
Leave it to me.
True to his word, I received the compensation from both of them. I didn't expect Tom and Jessica to pay, but the lawyer must have done an excellent job. With that, it finally felt like things were settled. Currently, the two of them are living in my former house. It felt a bit sad that Tom and Jessica had taken over the house filled with memories of Jane and the kids. But since the house title was changed to Tom's name after his father died, it couldn't be helped. A year later, my relationship with Tom was served entirely. Though he occasionally reached out to the kids, they ignored him. All the relatives, including Nancy, knew about Tom's actions and had cut ties with him. However, Emma received a call related to Tom.
The hospital called and said Dad was admitted.
Emma told me, looking troubled. Despite having a new wife, Jessica, why was the hospital contacting Emma? We didn't know what had happened, but it seemed like it might be something serious. Since they asked us to come, I called Mark and we headed to the hospital together. When we arrived, we were immediately shown to Tom's room. Jessica was sitting outside the room. When Jessica noticed we had arrived, she looked up quickly and approached me.
You can have that man back.
What?
I don't want to take care of him. If I had known he would need care just a year after we got married, I never would have married him.
Jessica was furious and out of control. Having just arrived, we had no idea what had happened and exchanged puzzled looks. A doctor, alerted by the commotion, explained Tom's condition to Emma and Mark. It seemed Tom had developed diabetes from years of poor health habits. He had been warned every year during his health checkups, but had ignored them. When the pain in his legs became unbearable, he went to the hospital, only to be told that amputation was the only option. He had been eating out and drinking with Jessica instead of eating at home, and even after getting married, he continued this lifestyle. Ignoring the results of his health checkups was asking for trouble, especially at his age.
He's going to be bedridden and will need constant care, but Jessica refuses to take care of him.
Emma relayed the doctor's words to us. I see. That explains why Jessica was so furious with me earlier. However, Tom was now a stranger to me. The three of us could only shake our heads in disbelief.
So I told her, I don't care. Put him in a facility.
Emma and Mark laughed softly. It might seem cruel to laugh at a sick person, but we had no sympathy for Tom or Jessica. Now that Tom needed care, maybe he'd understand what Jane went through, and Jessica should realize the burden of caregiving. Since we're all here, why don't we grab something to eat before heading back?
Sounds good.
Our lighthearted conversation seemed to catch Jessica's attention as she glared at us. But I paid no mind to her glare. Whatever life the two of them had ahead was no concern of ours. In the end, Tom was placed in a facility. They sold the house for that purpose. Jessica moved into a small apartment and only visited the facility to drop off clean laundry. A colleague of Emma's had a relative in the same facility as Tom. He mentioned that he had no visitors and was known for being demanding and challenging, making him unpopular among the staff. Even though I didn't expect special treatment for Tom just because he was sick, it was disheartening to see that he hadn't changed. He had abandoned his family for Jessica, only to be treated like she had abandoned him. While I felt a bit of pity, it was clear that Tom's actions had led to his current situation. Sometime later, Mark got married.
We're buying a new house. Would you like to live with us?
I'd been staying with Emma until now.
Mom, you can do whatever you like.
Emma was kind enough to say that, but I couldn't impose on her forever. Mark, let me pay for half of the new house so I can live with you.
You don't need to pay for the house. We just renovated a used one that wasn't that expensive.
I couldn't hold back my tears when I saw the house they found. It was the same house where I had lived with my children and Jane.
I found it on the market and thought it would make you happy.
I was touched by their kindness in doing this without telling me. Everything was new inside except for Jane's warmth, which still lingered. The kitchen, bedroom, and bathroom were all renovated. It's a beautiful home. As I whispered this, a slight breeze blew through the house, even though we were inside. It felt as if Jane was smiling at us. I felt confident of it. Today marks the beginning of a new chapter in this home. I believe Jane will be watching over our happiness from now on.